Hello, this is Seamus Keller. I'm delighted to be back with you all. In the past, you've heard me talk about mental wellness and suicide prevention, but today I want to talk about an incredibly important subject, and that's those who have lost somebody to suicide. My guest, Govan Martin, lost his brother many years ago, and that has impacted his life profoundly. It's one of the reasons he formed an organization called the Suicide Prevention Alliance. He's the chair and executive director of the organization, and I'm proud to be part of that organization with them. What we try to do is help those who struggle and help those impacted by suicide, and importantly, those who lost somebody to suicide. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Govan. Govan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks again, Seamus. It's really an honor for me to be here. And for all of you watching, that also touches my heart, because hopefully what we can do by having this conversation about suicide is that we can all make a difference and save lives today. One of the reasons why I do this is because I lost my brother to suicide, my brother Michael, at age 16, and I was 17 when I came home and found him. And really, that was really obviously hard for myself and for my family. But really what I got from that is like no one knew what to say to me. And I didn't even know how to react, what I was supposed to do. So for years and years and years, the most common response when actually people said, hey, did you have any siblings growing up? And when I said, that my brother had died by suicide, the most common response was either nothing or oh. And to me, that kind of hurt me. Because there was no conversation of that. No one ever actually talked about my brother after that revelation. So the one thing that really made me actually want to get involved in suicide prevention is when I met another loss survivor, someone who really was working with suicide prevention in the mid-2000s, who wanted me to come on and help. And the really connecting piece of that is that she was another loss survivor, and she normalized the fact that I wasn't the only one out there, that I wasn't the only one who's experiencing these feelings of loss, the feeling of uncomfortability of talking about suicide in a way where it was accepting and whereas a way that I could connect with that individual. So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this today is that each one of you can make a difference by just showing that you care, by accepting the conversation where someone might be approaching you, whether they're having thoughts of suicide themselves or being a loss survivor or possibly being an attempt survivor. There are so many different things that we can do. One of the first big pieces that we can do is by listening. And listening is kind of the most hardest thing that we can do, especially when people talk about grief and pain. However, if we approach it from a non-judgmental standpoint of view, if we approach it that we care about that individual, we find that most people will open up and share with us. And if we're accepting other pain, if we actually just reach out to show that we care, they will continue, and we can get them help that people may desperately need, whether they are having thoughts of suicide or whether or not they're a loss survivor. I was in a place where really I was lost for 25 years, that I didn't know who to share it with, that I was uncomfortable sharing with people because of the reactions that I got. But once I talked to a loss survivor, and she was also an attempt survivor as well, that made me see things from an entirely different point of view, that help is attainable. No matter where you're at in your place in life, and whether you're having thoughts of suicide, whether you attempt suicide, whether you lose somebody to suicide. And each one of us can make a difference by listening and just showing that we care. Those are the two biggest pieces that we can do, that anybody can do to help somebody who is going through or impacted by suicide. What you're gonna learn here today from Seamus, who is an amazing person who I'm proud to have and help format Suicide Prevention Alliance, that we can make a difference in people's lives every day. just by listening and showing that we care. A loss survivor is someone who's lost a loved one or a friend, coworker, family member to suicide. So, a lot of us are impacted by suicide every day. They say there's at least, 25 to every one suicide, 25 loss survivors. However, what we really believe that we know that if a suicide occurs in a community, within a family, that it affects a lot more than 25 people. If we give examples of, actors or actresses or rock stars or whoever who have died by suicide, we know that it can create a huge impact on that loss. An attempt survivor obviously is someone who's attempted suicide and has lived through that attempt. A lot of times though, terminology is important because we don't want to say words like a successful attempt, someone who's died by suicide. We don't want to say a failed attempt because again, failed attempt is a judgmental term. We don't want to add any more guilt to that person who's attempted and lived through that attempt. So also one of the big words we're trying to change now is, and already has been changed in the suicide community, is using the words commit and complete. Commit in a negative context, especially with suicide, means that you've committed a crime or a sin. So the common terminology we've changed it to now is died by suicide. Again, that's not a judgmental word, and actually it's leading to being inclusive and helping people, especially loss survivors, approach mental health professionals, support groups to get the help that they need. One of the things also that we'd like to talk about is where do you go? A lot of people have no idea whether they're having thoughts of suicide, whether they're helping somebody who's having thoughts of suicide, or even attempt survivors or loss survivors. Where do we go? So there are a lot of different places, but one of the number one places we go to is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And that number is 1-800-273-8255. I'll say it again, 1-800-273-8255. That is the biggest resource that's out there, that if you're having thoughts of suicide, you can call that number. If you want help and guidance on how to help somebody, you can also call that number. The number one resource for the millennial generation and below, it's that younger generation, because we've all come to using technology as a form of reaching out for help. So that resource is the crisis text line. If you text 741-741, a licensed clinical counselor will actually pop up and help you out. But also, I really want to stress, sometimes you're going to get maybe a delay in getting help. Look for those local resources in your area. Look for the crisis intervention line in your area. If you need to call 911, call 911. But make sure if someone is in crisis and has a plan for suicide, and you're not getting the National Suicide Prevention Line or the crisis text line right away, reach out to those local resources. You may have a suicide hotline in your local area, but you can find that out in looking through your county area. Really, to sum all of this up, is that there are so many people out there that are impacted by suicide. Right now, the current stats are over 47,000 people who have died in 2019 by suicide. So, and even with those 47,000, we really believe that 10 to 20% are underreported. So imagine the people that are affected. Imagine the fact that over 1 million people have attempted suicide, and those are the ones that go to the hospital. So we know that there's many, many, many people that are impacted by suicide every day. And there is support out there for you. There is support out there for your loved ones who have thoughts of suicide. There is support for attempt survivors who have attempted and have feeling that they have nowhere to go. So also for loss survivors. We know that as I was affected by suicide, I felt I had nowhere to go in 1980. But now there are so many places that we can get help, that there's support out there for each and every one of you and the people that you know who have been affected by suicide. So one good resource that you can obviously reach out to is our website, suicidepreventionalliance.org. please go there. We have many, many resources for all different facets of those who are having thoughts about suicide. So we have, again, attempt survivor groups. Hopefully they'll be in your area. Loss survivor groups will be in your area. Mental health resources that are going to be in your area. Don't feel that you're alone. And if you need advice, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They can guide you through that process where you can get help for the people that are obviously in your life that may be having thoughts of suicide or been impacted by suicide. We care about you. We care about your role as a helper. We care about your role if you have lost someone to suicide. I'm so sorry for your loss if you have. But please know that you can make a difference in helping all those who are impacted or affected by suicide today. Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here today again. And please play your own role, your own part into preventing suicide and helping those who are affected by suicide. So thank you. Thanks, Seamus.
Govan, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. I know it's hard, but what you said today, I think it's going to help a lot of people. In very pragmatic terms, you told us what someone who suffers loss, what they can do and where they can go for help. And if you need additional information, go to the suicidepreventionalliance.org website. It's full of great information. We all have a role to play in preventing the scourge of suicide. So let's take action. Let's pay attention to the signs. Let's follow some of Govan's great advice. So I want you to take care of yourselves, number one, and then I want you to take care of each other. Thanks for joining me today. Once again, my name is Seamus Gallagher.